Thank you, Val, for this opportunity. Um, so what we'd like to do when Val approached us, I want everybody to know Jim and Brad and Ken and I have known each other for years as operational security practitioners for companies large and small. And so we've been in the trenches and are still in the trenches for 60, 70 hours a week. And what we've come to understand and why we wanted to work with Val here is talk about the brutal truths of this sales process from a security perspective, meaning selling into security, that differentiate this market from most other markets, like selling jeans or delivering power, that we're doing a disservice to the security child that this village is supposed to be raising. And we thought, what better way to do it but to actually talk about some of the practices that we see and how we respond that you don't see, in order to be able to start that conversation that says we have a shared responsibility between buyer and seller to be able to protect ourselves against a common enemy, right? The bad guys are trying to take us and put us all out of business. And yet we don't seem to want to understand that the shared responsibility that we all have as both consumers and producers of security products want to work together, that shared responsibility. And so today is really the brutal truth of, let's talk about the tactics and the strategies that most sales teams are doing and how it is creating a negative impact. It's breaking our overall security posture, not making it better, and what we can do. Okay. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to pose some questions or some things that we commonly see and ask each of us to talk about how we respond to it so that you're hearing right from us what's happening. And we obviously share with our peers. So you're going to get 4 opinions that I don't know what they're going to say. We've kept this to be very live so that you're hearing it ad hoc. And hopefully you take the message for what it is, which was, how do we get better as a team, right? As an industry over the hour. So my first one is cold calls and cold emails, right? Standard tactic, a lot of technology and automation out there to make it work. A lot of young salespeople told, get in there and start making calls and open up your sales pipeline. So I'm going to start with cold emails because that's everybody's favorite. And what I'd like to do is have each of you talk about how cold emails are received by you and what you do about it. And I'm going to start with Ken, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. Interesting. I mean, cold emails to me are one of those things if it actually makes it to me through the filters and anti-spam stuff that I have in place already, right? If it actually gets to me, I'm probably going to glance at it. I'm going to see if it's something that I might want to, is it a technology or something I'm looking at down the road? More than likely, I'm filing it away for future use, right? Unless it's something dealing with something that I've got an immediate need for, I'm just going to ignore it, more or less, right? If it is something I'm interested in and talking about in the near future, and I reach back out to you from a cold email because I have genuine interest in learning more about the product, what that doesn't mean is I'm expecting to buy it tomorrow and you need to try to set a meeting up with me that afternoon. That annoys the hell out of me, because if I don't respond, I may reach back out to you and say, yes, I want to learn more about this product. I would like to schedule some time in the near future to deep dive on this, get my questions answered, and see if it's really something I need to flesh out a little more. But to keep emailing me and going, well, when are we going to set this up? When are we going to set this up? And when I say, let's set it up in 3 months, and you send an invite back for 3 days, it's irritating, right? So the biggest thing I can tell you there is listen to what I'm telling you when if I respond to your cold email, right? And more than likely, if I'm interested in a product, I probably know a reseller. I probably know someone at the manufacturer, possibly. If I don't know them at the manufacturer, I definitely know a reseller then in the market who does sell it. And I'm probably going to reach out to them first anyway, for people I have trusted partnerships and relationships with, because we've worked over time to develop that trusted relationship where we know we're both telling each other the full truth and we're transparent about it. Right now, I understand that the young inside sales reps and stuff that you're trying to get them experience on that, but the high pressure stuff just really gets on my nerves because it's just the constant back and forth going, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? And then they'll just blindly sending me meeting invites without discussing it. You start blindly sending me meeting invites without discussing it, that's probably going to get you blocked. So, I mean, that's just to be perfectly blunt about it. I live and die by my calendar, and I really can't. You have zero visibility in it, so you don't know what else is on my schedule. And again, it just is, it's a forceful tactic. It's intrusive, and it's something that I'm not a fan of.
Thank you. Ken.
Do we want to talk about the cold calls, or we're going to just move through the email first?
Let's just start with the email, because that is one I think is just, it's a pandemic. And so letting us look at that first, and then we'll keep going. We have 45. So go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, and I'd probably split this into two things, and one would be InMail, so LinkedIn InMail, and then the other being traditional email. I mean, on the traditional email side, I receive literally hundreds of email messages every day, and most of those represent work, things, something I've got to do, and I really organized my work through my inbox. So I'll be very honest, typically when I open an unsolicited commercial email, I scroll down to see if there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom, because if there isn't one, that an unsubscribe link, then, or if I don't use it, then I'm probably going to get follow-ups on a regular basis in the future, and I'm trying to avoid that. I might glance at the message. Obviously, it has to be targeted. So one of the things I've noticed is a large volume of email that's not even targeted at security professionals. So they're going, we do development services in India, and I'm the CISO. Why would you target me for that at all? So a lot of it just gets deleted offhand. And the way that things work from a buyer's perspective is there is probably a year runway between when I've decided that we need to purchase a product or service and when I actually have fully budgeted for it and I'm ready to go in terms of lining up the resources on my side. So if it's not something that I'm planning on doing anytime in the near future, again, I'm just deleting it because there's nothing I can do about it anyway.
Good. Jim?
Thanks, Steve. So I kind of think of it from a larger 10,000 foot view, right? I mean, obviously I'm going to follow what Ken and Brad had said in terms of tactical use of email, because just like them, I get hundreds of emails and trying to sort through what is important. If there's a keyword that comes up, which is very, very rare, it's probably about 1 in about 5,000, I'll give it whatever attention and then possibly engage. But, just understanding all these emails coming in and trying to figure out the state of the market, like what you were saying at the outset, in terms of building a better village. Are we building a better village for cyber where it's a win-win situation, both buy and sell side? Or is this just seen as an opportunistic time and market for folks to rush in and kind of get their piece in kind of a bull market of cyber product and service before some perceived end of it comes down the pipe? And the volume of those attempts inbound in terms of in through the door tells me that there's just more and more of like this red ocean effect, where you have more and more entrants, more and more folks trying to encroach in different areas of cyber. And it's not only annoying from a flow of communication, but understanding which piece is which, and everybody's trying to bleed into different sectors and subsectors of security. So I think it's doing a great disservice, not only from just taking us away from our regularly scheduled stuff that we all have to do, but it's confusing also in terms of the functionality and the workability of all these different things. And it just adds to the confusion of what we need, as practitioners. And I'm sure Brad and Ken and Steve, you could probably concur, we basically focus on risk. Risk is the core of how we're going to purchase any of these things. And having a deluge of these types of attempts coming in, it's not helping, it's actually harming more than just the time it takes to respond to these. It's infusing a lot of confusion in the marketplace in general. So overall, yes, I would agree with what everybody has said. It's not the best way to engage. And I think if I suspect I'm right, Steve, you're probably going to lead us toward the right way to do this. And it's essentially a relationship, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jim. And Brad, I need to let you respond about LinkedIn emails, because that is a hot topic as well. So apologize for cutting you off. Go ahead and respond.
That's okay. Yeah, I saw that question pop up in the chat, and yeah, I didn't even start it on that. But I mean, I think of LinkedIn again traditionally as a professional networking service. I think what a lot of sales folks think it is essentially a lead generation engine. And I get quite a few, and I'm sure all of you guys get this as well, where there's a connect request, and then the minute that you accept it, a pitch is vomited on you, right? And I would say that if you're going to use that mechanism, I mean, I do accept a lot of connection requests because I do want to establish professional relationships with folks. But that's not how, if I met you in a party, I would hope you wouldn't start by pitching me the moment we met without even getting to know me yet. So I'd say at least hold a conversation a bit via LinkedIn and mail before you vomit the sales pitch on me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the other thing you see on that is we definitely see the spike in LinkedIn InMail and regular email when an event happens. I don't need a salesperson to call me and tell me that some events happened in the world and it's a bad thing. I know that more than likely, right? We all do this for a living. We all understand that people are getting attacked and having that. I know some people who've heard me speak on this subject matter before. I don't need you to come and tell me what my problem is. And I don't need you to inundate me with an email telling me that I'm having the same problem as X because you just saw X in the news and your product is the magic bullet that's going to fix this project. And you know that I have this problem. And that's how you lead out this email, right? Number one, those are definitely going to get ignored. And like Bradley, I'm an open networker on LinkedIn. I'll connect to just about anybody, right? I just grow the network. It helps the overall network around the thing. But I think the biggest thing is using LinkedIn to get, I think one of the best things I can suggest with either the email or LinkedIn InMail is use it as a way to set up some time and see when I have time to talk to you and talk about your technology or an emerging technology, or you would like to discuss what your company is doing, and let's see if it's the right fit. Don't just come at me telling me, it's going to solve all my problems, because that shuts me down pretty much right off the bat, because I don't trust. We've been told too many times that we get the silver bullet that fixes everything, and then we come and find out it doesn't, right? So I think that's a big part of this farming that relationship, as we were talking about, is setting up time to listen, have transparent conversations. Now, I think sales teams owe it to us to be transparent and be truthful and be honest on what their product can do, what it doesn't do well, what is not in the product, right? Because if you're honest with me up front, there's a better chance I'm going to continue having a conversation with you that it may not be the right fit now. And if you can explain to me down the road when these things are going to be in and when it's going to be developed, and I'm more likely to continue having that conversation with you. But you've also got to understand, and I think everybody who does this knows most of our budgets are pretty much set for next year, right? Matter of fact, we're probably in the phases, most of us are in the phases right now to where we're getting final cuts out of the budget, right? And final approval. And so you hitting me up with a product today going, hey, when can we look at this? And when do you think you'd be ready to purchase it? And blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm a year out, minimum a year out. My budget's set. Unless something blows up and I have to create an emergency implementation and fix something, I'm not going to be budgeting for any new tool for next year. So, and I think the services, because somebody asked this earlier when we were talking about software, hardware, and services, the same thing applies to services, right? Because if I'm buying a service from you, or I'm interested in buying a service from you, we need to make very clear, both of us need to make very clear we understand what our success factors are, what our requirements are, and what your full capabilities are, where the handoff points are, where the shared responsibility is. All that has to be defined and figured out over a period of time, because we just can't just throw this stuff in here, because that's why so many of them fail. And the first thing you do, we go to these CISO things, and the first thing we hear from everybody is, oh, company XYZ sucks. And then you run into that company that was selling the service and you go, well, I've not heard great things about your service, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, that customer, they didn't listen to us. They didn't do. So there's this constant back and forth, and it's never a good look to blame your customer, and it's never a good look to come in and tell us how bad a competitor is. Because one of the first questions I'm always going to ask is, who is your biggest competitor in this market, and where do you feel you stack up best against them, and where do you feel they stack up better against you, right?
Yep.
And I think we owe it to each other just to be honest and truthful.
Ken. So I hope for the folks that are listening, we're watching the chat, we're responding, you see the passion that we have in communicating to you to try to help you understand what the day in the life of a CISO looks like, right? That's what this call is. And so I hope you're appreciating as we're talking through this. I want to close on the cold email with my perspective quickly, which was, and one we didn't talk about. If I respond to your email and tell you, contact me in 6 months, I don't have a need for you, contact me in 6 months, okay? And you decide to now spam my organization by reaching out to the other people in the security organization, figuring, well, if Steve is the CISO or the chief security architect didn't want it, let me reach out to my director of security operations or another architect or anybody else that I have, okay? That churn that you create, because then all of a sudden somebody else responds, you think you're in, I already know that we're not going to, as Ken said, purchase for the next 6 months. You've made a problem for me. Now you're a problem, and you don't ever want to be considered a problem, as Ken said. Okay, so we watch for that, and we would often, if I see it or my threat intelligence guy would see it too, would respond. I need you guys to know that if we catch that behavior, sometimes we warn you, but let me tell you, every one of us owns our firewalls, right? Security teams now run the firewalls, including the email filters. And we've got a lot in, and we have actually black-holed particular salespeople, even companies, for a week or 30 days, and just killed all the email because you were spamming me. And that's how we take care of the problem. So beware, right? That's what I mean, which is we don't necessarily tell you, but we are taking active defensive measures against this spamming that we consider it when we see you violating our trust or not listening to us. So just some words of the wise.
I got one thing to add to that, Steve. Have your people verify whether or not we're a customer before they start cold calling us from an inside sales team. It's amazing how many cold emails, cold calls, LinkedIn invites I get from somebody trying to sell me a product that I'm already a customer. And that drives me nuts. And normally I will call my account rep or whoever my executive is on my account and go, do you not publish a list to your teams? And that to me is a sign of a disconnect inside the sales development side of the house. Is there's a disconnect there. And that means they're buying a list somewhere and not cleaning it up, right? And not validating whether or not we're already a customer. And then if you get pushy and I'm already a customer, you probably put the account in jeopardy. So,
That's right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you violated the trust, the limited trust you built. So let me transition. You can see we've talked about a lot. I want to go to one more use case, and then we're going to talk about what farming looks like. So we can spend, some time. End of quarter, end of year sales pressure. So what I'd like each of you to do is talk about, right, the cold calling, because this results in cold calling and oftentimes pressure, right, to close a quarter or close the year and prematurely attempt to do it. So Jim, I'll start with you. Talk to me about what that process looks like for you and the pain that it creates.
Yeah, Steve. So I think it's only effective by and large if we have a relationship. I think if it's a cold outreach with some kind of end of year discount for some product that I'm not familiar with or it's not top of mind in terms of the way our risk is measured, there's not much chance of us putting anything through because I wouldn't have enough time to survey that area in the market and to see if really I'm getting, a great deal or at least a fair deal based on whatever you're offering me. But to backtrack, if somebody that I've been working with comes to me with an end of year deal or an end of quarter deal, obviously we understand the pressures from the sales side as well as our side. I mean, we're not blind to this reality. But I think it has to really be, you have to allow us as the flag holders for security in our organizations to lead the charge in terms of getting the deal done, right? From inception to approvals to redlining of agreements, if there is any, onward to the actual purchase. I think any attempts to subvert that is not going to be a positive thing for you moving forward there. Rarely will I see something out of the blue where it says, oh, by the way, at the end of the year, you can jump on this thing. It's usually a low dollar, low figure thing. And sometimes, if I can throw it on a credit card, it might work. But again, I think you have to make sure that you're not disempowering the ultimate relationship that you're trying to build, and that's with us.
Excellent. Bradley.
I would say I drive my agenda and my timelines. My vendors do not. It's really that simple. This is a tactic that never works for me. I always assume that if I can get that deal by the end of this quarter, I can probably get that deal at the end of next quarter as well. So all you may have accomplished with me is to get me to defer my purchase another quarter because I'm not ready yet now.
Yep. Ken?
Yeah, I was reading some of the chats in here, some of the questions that are coming out. I think I agree with everything everybody said on this one. I was going to say the one question that just popped up here at the end, and I was kind of thinking about it, is if I say wait 6 months, it means don't contact my team. That's right, because if you've already reached out to me and got a response from me, don't go around me to my team and then start trying to get them to put pressure on me, right? Because hopefully me and my team have already been talking about this. Hopefully we've had a conversation about it. And if it's something I'm interested in, I may tell my team to reach out to you and get the deep dive, right? And dig into it a little bit because I don't have time to necessarily deal with it. But
and if you don't mind me actually jumping in on that one for a second, it's not just my own team, it's my peers.
Oh, yeah.
That is another thing that drives me nuts is suddenly assume that anything security related is going to be forwarded directly to me, because that is exactly what happens. You reach out to my CEO and the CIO and the VP of IT infrastructure. When they get that, they're forward Brad and sending it to me. So I know instantly that you're trying to go around me.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I'll admit, I shut a vendor 100% out of one of my roles for going around me and complaining to the CIO who I was the CISO at the time, but worked for the CIO. And that ended a very long-term relationship between that company, that vendor, and our company, because of them going around me and trying to put pressure on me to make a purchase through them when they were not the better provider and not the better price, and trying to get me put pressure on me because of a relationship they had with the CIO. And that ended their tenure as a supplier for us. And I'll be honest with you, I still to this day would have a hard time going back and using that company because of that.
Yep.
Right. It's frustrating.
Good. So let me close on this one, because I know everybody's dying to get to the next as we're talking about, which was my experience. I'm going to talk about cold calls. Okay. My office phone was a sinkhole. I never answered it. Okay. Because my phone number, if I give it out, becomes public knowledge to everybody and everybody starts to make calls. So I literally never, ever answered my office phone, and it always just went to voicemail. Okay. And the reason why is if it was somebody from my company, I'd be able to see it. Otherwise, I ignore it. And most people in the company, and Brad and Jim and Ken know this, if my CEO or my CFO needed to get to me, my cell phone and a text message. You don't do regular email. I mean, a regular phone call doesn't work, or it might be their admin. Okay. So just realize most of us sinkhole it. And then if you have my cell phone number and you cold call, you're dead to me. Because the fact that you have my cell phone number and you know it, that is a trust. That is a trust that I gave you at one point, and you need to understand how important that trust is with that number. Okay. And so if there's a phone call coming in there, I won't answer it unless it's in my inbox. But if there's a voicemail, I may very well listen to the voicemail, because it could be somebody coming in internationally or one of my peers like Brad giving me a call, and I don't necessarily know, so I'm going to listen. So you be very, very careful with that. And then the second thing on quarterly and year close, I want to say what Ken says. There's no secret. We know any end of any quarter, any year, we can get a deal. Okay. We know it. So don't even try. Okay. You're going to talk to a young CISO maybe, or somebody who might know that. But here's what you also know for most of us that are senior. You oftentimes will try to buy the deal. Let's assume we're in an evaluation or it's quarter, and you'll give it to us for pennies on the dollar. We don't want it, because what we also understand is you have to make money as well. So if you've had to give it to us at below cost, then you're going to find ways to make more money off of us. You're going to nickel and dime us with every service call, with every whatever. We want to pay fair dollars for fair value. So we're not inclined to go there, because again, we want to be a reputable company on both sides. And the last thing I'll say is, for every salesperson out there, the first question you want to ask, if you've actually got a legitimate sales lead and Ken or Brad or Jim or I talk to you, is ask how the sales process works inside the company. Okay, because we don't just have a checkbook and cut you a check. Depending upon the size of the company and the approval loops, it can take us 6 months to get approvals if it's a big company. And to Ken's point, oftentimes our budgets are predetermined. So unless something's happened, that we manage it. Okay. If you go around us and you disrupt that process, there's a lot of relationships we have internally in order to be able to have the purchase process roll through and get all the approvals and get the CIO ready to know to expect it. Or all of a sudden my purchasing team says, I got a call and they're offering us a deal. Steve, I didn't know that you were shopping for this. That's what you're doing. You're creating a lack of trust and you're creating more work for me. And why would I buy something from you now that you've made more work? So just be aware of that. All right, we got 20 minutes left. Let's pivot now to, we've showed you how hunting doesn't work. These are all the practical ways that you may not have understood how traditional sales hunting is creating a problem for us. And so now you want to be smarter about it. And we talk about now about farming, right? We say hunting versus farming. So what does farming look like from a security perspective for us? So what we're going to say is, I'm going to leave it an open question and going, so for each of them, I want them to describe what a farming relationship looks like. What is it that works for them as they work through the vendor ecosystems or our peers as to what a good farming relationship looks like, so that we all start to understand how we have to transition. Okay, so Bradley, I'm going to start with you. What does farming look like to Brad?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that where I get my unbiased information from is from my peers. So the first thing you can do is do a fabulous job for your existing customers, because likely I'm going to go to one of them to ask them, who are they using that they trust that have done a good job for them. So I'm not typically, using Gartner Magic Quadrants and Forrester Waves to determine who I'm going to buy. I've reached out to the peers that are sitting in this room with me right now and said, hey, who do you use and who do you trust? There's an element of that. And then so that's more on I guess, laying the boundary so that when you do make the outreach, that I'm actually interested in talking to you, or that I actually know who you are. So that's another aspect of it. I think a big question is, how do I get the word out about me if I'm not cold calling you or reaching out to you on LinkedIn? So there's an element of making sure that you get your name out there before you do the cold calling. So I don't know if that's more of a disconnect between sales and marketing, like make sure your marketing arm actually gets the word out about what you do out there before you start trying to sell it. So there's an aspect of that. I think those efforts need to be well connected as well.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, what Brad was talking about is we as practitioners are involved in a lot of affinity groups. So we speak amongst each other, and sometimes on a specific topic, actually often on a specific, type of need or topic or what have you. We get a lot of feedback very fast, very credible. A couple other, when I think about farming, back to your original question, though, Steve, I think the majority of the farming opportunities or efforts, at least at the outset before a relationship is developed, should happen external to the practitioner's organization rather than trying to break in through the bastilles, as it were. So a couple of great ideas in terms of trying to engage us outside of our protective walls, right? So what's one kind of outreach that I would never discard in a million years? Maybe a request to be a speaker in a group that you are, like this roundtable that we put together. Get us involved. It definitely, besides stroking our egos, which it always happens, it allows you at least to get a conversation going, as long as it's not a sales heavy type of event. As well as there are other open affinity groups out there in the market, like ISC2, obviously the certification body has a lot of groups. I'm on the board of the Cloud Security Alliance chapter in the New York metro area. And when we did events, at least before the pandemic, we had a great mix of practitioners and solution providers. We had a very good ecosystem and harmony to those discussions. And a lot of great relationships were built because everybody understood what the playing field was about. It was about, as Steve said at the outset, building a better security village, not trying to match up one-to-one and sell stuff, alone. Otherwise, these types of things will not flourish. Events, I saw in the chat here, somebody talking about events. I would say it's a medium effectiveness to try to engage us, as long as it's not a pure sales type of event. If it's more structured around a topic, and again, that you have a majority of practitioners rather than go-to-market sales folks. So once you can kind of get us engaged, it's more of a pull relationship rather than try to push in. And you're going to see it's a lot easier rather than setting your CRM to automatically spam us, 500,000 times. You can see a lot more success rates, I would say.
Excellent. Ken?
Yeah, I'll echo pretty much everything that you guys have said to this point. And I think one thing you think about it is, and I saw this in the chat too, is where do we get this information to kind of come off of emerging technology and what's out there? Well, one, I probably have a few trusted partner VARs that I'm going to, if there's something on the market, my hope is that our relationship is that they can show me a new product coming on the market without a ton of sales pressure, right? They're just said, hey, this, and a couple of the companies I work with, a couple of them do it very well. Like, hey, we've seen this new technology out here. Thought, from conversations we've had in the past, thought you might want to take a look at it. Would you like us just to set up a 30-minute demo, walk through it, decide whether or not it's something I want to do a much deeper dive on? Those work well. I think the other piece of the events have got their place, but when they get to the point where they're so big that it's nothing but a vendor show, it's kind of a waste of time, right? Because we don't have a whole lot of time to spend talking about what we truly want to talk about. It's just a constant sales pitch, just boom, 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 as you go through talking to people. I think what works better are smaller, intimate roundtables and panels and things like this, where we have that topic. The manufacturer or vendor has capabilities around that topic. We get a group of people who have questions or have comments or have opinions on that topic, and we have an open conversation without being sold to, without that team coming in and saying, well, you need to buy our product because it's going to fix your problem. What it really allows us is to have a conversation that also allows the vendor manufacturer to hear where our pain points are and where they may not be up to speed. And if you can do that in a much smaller, much more intimate group, and to be honest with you, I know that's why Val created this, and this is part of what we're talking about here. When we do these smaller groups, we can have a really deep, discussion on a topic that allows a manufacturer to interject what they see, because they do get to see stuff. They do get to see stuff in a bigger landscape than we do, right? Because we're looking at just our stack, where you get to see it across the board. So I think that's part of it, and being willing to share that information in a Chatham House rules environment and be honest and admit where you don't do it well or where you do it well. That's a huge part of building that trust, right? That is how I go about it. Now, I know over the years I've probably been a little, because I've been told this, I'm a little different than a lot of people have, because I'll talk to people. I don't have a problem because I go to a lot of events and speak at a lot of events. I talk to people, right? I think the biggest thing I can tell you is if I'm truly interested in it, I will continue the conversation. If I'm not interested in it, or it isn't going to do me any good, I'll tell you. But the smaller, more focused events are definitely, there's more value prop. And in the world, I think that's one thing the Zoom world has allowed us to do over the last 2 years, is to do these more 45-minute to an hour intimate discussions on a cybersecurity topic that is near and dear to us, that we can talk about and have interesting dialogue that is of value to everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, one other item that I'd like to bring up would be contribution to the security community, I guess, in general. And what I mean by that is, I'll give an example. A company called Attack IQ that does breach and attack simulation software. They've created this entire training program on purple teaming and MITRE ATT&CK framework and all that. That's really solid material, and it doesn't pitch their product at all. Doesn't even discuss their product. But they offer kind of this free training to get people up to speed on the MITRE ATT&CK framework and penetration testing and all of that kind of stuff. And they offer that completely in gratis to free to anybody in the world. And I've had a lot of the folks on my red team and my blue team go through all that training. They found it very valuable. I'm not a customer, but we're going to look at breach and attack simulation software later this year. And guess who's #1 on the list? Because I already know that they know what they're talking about when it comes to MITRE ATT&CK framework and threat informed defense. It's going to be Attack IQ.
Yep. So let me offer my perspective. And you can see for folks that are listening, we're going through because everybody has a different perspective. So we're trying to give you as many practical perspectives to see some of the nuances and differences, because every CISO is a snowflake and every company is still a snowflake. There's not a common way to solve the problem. We're still young, right? The CISO as a role over the last 5 years has matured substantially, right? The location of where a CISO reports to, the needs of a company, depending upon whether it's legal or regulatory, or it's in healthcare, or it's retail. So folks need to understand that's why you're seeing so many perspectives as well, is because it's not like being a CFO where you have one set of books and you can pretty much be that everywhere and you do it the same way. There's a lot of art to what we're doing, including the relationships. So with that, I want to offer a couple of thoughts for myself. One, what I look for if I talk to somebody is, do you have the best interest of my company first and foremost? And what I mean by that is, if you're a salesperson and you approach me and you've demonstrated that you've looked at my company, you've trying to understand what it is that I'm trying to do. And I used to say this, and I still do effective. I would talk to a sales guy. He'd come at me and I'd say, and he's like, I'm here to help you. You have to buy my product. It's the best product. It's unique and it's going to help you because the bad guys are beating you. So obviously buy this thing. I look at him and I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you what, help me understand how this sells more jeans. Help me understand, not as a security product, but truly as a business practitioner, that you're helping me, you're demonstrating to me you understand how I am thinking about my responsibility to either secure my business, protect my business, or enable my business. And that as a security practitioner, there's a lot of views. How good are you at understanding the customer that you're selling to, as opposed to just understanding your product and pitching me sales points? Less than 10% of the sales team is prepared to do that. That's step one in establishing a farming relationship and trust. You're demonstrating that you're taking the risk and the time to understand. And in exchange, I may then give you the time to continue that relationship, like Ken said. Okay, but that doesn't turn into a direct sale. That's the beginning of a good relationship, because you're now putting yourself out there. You're willing to look at your boss and go, I'm not going to close this quarter with Levi's because I can't jam it in, and I will not jam it in because the relationship with Steve will probably go beyond the company I'm working for right now, because salespeople move all the time, especially now with 6,000 products and 3,000 companies. So I'm more interested in establishing relationships like Ken and Brad and Jim said, with resellers that I trust, or with salespeople, and I'm more likely to take a call from them subsequently because they've already demonstrated they're not going to just try to sell me a product. They may believe this product is legitimate, okay, and they're doing that homework. That's the beginning of farming. The second thing I'll say is with regards to events and everything, like Jim talked about and Brad and Ken is. And I've talked to Malcolm Harkins this morning about this too, which was, if you're selling a product, get an event together and make sure your CISO is at the event, or your head of product development is at the event. It is not a sales event. What you're doing is giving us an opportunity to pick a topic, talk about endpoint protection, talk about ransomware, talk about malware, talk about zero trust, talk about concepts that give us an opportunity as peers to talk about what it means for us, including with your CISO and your head of product development, because they're supposed to understand and they're supposed to be able to represent your company on those topics. And the sales and product marketing teams listen, no talking. Okay, you are being given a very special opportunity to understand, as Steve and Ken and Brad and Jim talk about zero trust, or in this case, the brutal truth of selling, about what it is, so that you absorb it to be able to go back with your CISO and your head of product development and have those conversations, because they're your in-house experts. They are just like us. So what are we doing to leverage that relationship? Which is why, 6 or 7 of us over wine or over whiskey or doing some event like that, that really what we're doing is engaging in conversation with each other, and you have the special privilege of being able to listen. Okay. And it's not sales about, here's why my product is the best. That's another key for farming, that as you look forward, that we think would be really important, at least from my perspective, that's what we're trying to do to also establish a better relationship, which is, what are you doing in your company to leverage your expertise, right, for security practitioners? So with that, we are almost up. We've got like 6 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is ask each of our practitioners to have a minute for any closing thoughts that they would like on brutal truths, how to sell to security practitioners in this day and age, to be able to import any last pieces of wisdom, and then I'll turn it over to Val to be able to close the conversation. So with that, Jim, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I suspect that a lot of folks attending today's webinar are thinking about, all right, I've got this field of decision makers, and how do I build relationship? How do I get the first ice block broken between us? That's, I think, spurned on all these different automated methods of reaching out. And as subsequently, as Steve and Ken and Brad have said, and myself, it's destroyed that pipeline, not built it in most cases. Focus on what you can give back to the community at large, to us, even if it's a compliment or whatever. I promise you, I will do my best to respond in kind to any of those efforts.
Thank you, Jim. Very heartfelt and excellent feedback. Ken?
Yeah, I think the parting wisdom is just what we've talked about, is take your time, learn my business, learn my problems. Don't assume you know what my issues are. Take that time to talk with me and figure out how you can possibly help me, or if you can't. Now, I owe it to you when we have a conversation to tell you whether or not you can help me or not, right? And I feel that I try to do that pretty bluntly. It's just not this time, and if I don't, feel free to ask me. If you don't feel you're getting a clear response from me, feel free to ask me and remind me that you want to understand whether or not there's an opportunity, because I owe it to you to be as transparent with you on that as I want you to be with me. So it's a two-way street, and I think there's a lot of CISOs and leadership out there that could learn that lesson as well. and I'm going to answer one of the last questions that come in. Just if you find vulnerabilities in a threat hunter like that, find out who our partners are and let them know. Because the problem is we're going to immediately take that as you're trying to sell us something and we don't trust it. Plus, there's also a bunch of scam stuff that goes on with that, where they're telling you got vulnerabilities. So find a partner that we're using, have that conversation with them and let them initiate the discussion. So at least put a trusted partner in there first. Because if you, I get them all the time, especially at my last job. People would contact me on LinkedIn all the time and go, "Oh, we see activity on one of your systems, one of your IPs that belong to you." And it's like, it doesn't seem legit. So don't trust it.
Yep. Excellent, Ken. All right. And Brad, I can't wait. There's going to be a pearl of wisdom here. He's just been waiting. Go for it.
I a lot of this is going to be a repeat of what's already been said, but I definitely play the long game. So it's about building a relationship over time. The sales will come. The hardest part is probably that initial contact or getting in the door. And that's simply the result of the fact that there's too much volume. I get 24 LinkedIn in-mail requests every day for a meeting. And if I took them all I would do is spend the day talking to folks on the phone for 20 or 30 minutes. So it's build a relationship with fellow CISOs that I know, so that I'm going to hear good things about your product, and then also make sure you get out there or get word out about what you do before the initial outreach, so I know who you are. And then it's a matter of understanding our process. So a good thing, I am actually extremely open about talking about, here's what our budget cycle is, here's where we're at, here's what's on my roadmap for next year. I'm not making that stuff up. It's the honest to God truth. When I tell you it's not on the roadmap for next year, it really isn't. And from a budgetary perspective, I really don't make out of budget purchases. So just forge a relationship with me so that next year when it is in budget, you're on the top 3 list.
Wow, that's gold. The one thing, and I will add, is you've got to get much better at your elevator pitch. Okay. You can't come at me for 30 minutes and think that by talking faster, you're going to be more likely to make a sale. Okay. You have to be able to understand your product, and in 5 to 7 minutes, speaking at a normal pace, communicate how it is of value to me. And I think that is something that a lot of CEOs and sales execs really don't take heart, right? I would go to somebody and say, you have 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, what do you want me to remember about your company? Because I only have so many brain cells and so much time. So you got 5 minutes to tell me the most important thing. And I do a lot of advising, people know, what I tell them is, you have one slide that's what's the brutal truth? What is the brutal truth about the problem that you're putting on the table that nobody wants to talk about? Okay, not how you're great. What's the brutal truth, right? For example, phishing attacks will always be effective because humans are lazy. That's a brutal truth. And so now what are we going to do about it? Okay. Second one is, show me what your solution design is. One slide, show me the picture. That's what it is, so I can get it. Third slide is, give me a use case of how it's deployed. And the fourth case is how much. That's all we need to know. Okay. We can take it from there. And so in 5 to 7 minutes, we're good. And then you can have a productive 10-minute conversation with Ken or Brad or Jim or I around where that might fit in. So set a higher bar for expectation of what that executive communication looks like for you, and treat every opportunity as that type of an elevator pitch. All right, with that, we're done. I want to turn it over to Val. Val, thank you very much for sponsoring this opportunity for us to be able to kind of talk about what we see as the true challenges in the sales cycle.
Steve, well done, by the way. Great job
Yeah,
moderating.
great job, Steve. Great job, Jim and Bradley.
Yeah, likewise. We could have done 4 webinars from all the content of this.
That's right. So again, thank you everyone for attending this, and especially thank you, Steve, Ken, Jim, and Brad, you were amazing as I expected you would be. You can imagine I got tens and tens of emails saying how insightful people found this webinar, which was the whole goal here. I hope everyone heard what I heard, which obviously I have known for the last 20 years, which is basically the only way you build authentic business relationships is to build that trust, to think about farming versus hunting, to also think about the long-term aspect here versus this short-term, let me sell you my product now and my product is better than anybody else's. None of that actually works, as you heard it from the actual practitioners themselves. And I think what was emphasized over and over and over again was the fact that they trust their peers, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone else. And lastly, I think as they all kind of elaborated much better than I can, but it was pretty much highlighted that they need to come to you versus you going to them. With that, I would love to close this webinar. Again, if anyone wants to join our network to meet any of these executives in one-on-one fashion or in the context of a virtual roundtable, please email me and we can walk you through the process there. Our executive network consists of 500 plus security practitioners, with 30 of them being extremely active, and all of them of the quality that you witnessed during the last hour, which I think all of you would agree was pretty impressive. None of the security practitioners in our network have less than 15 years of experience, so they're truly the C-suite execs who control billions of dollars in technology budgets, but most importantly, know the business inside out and can help you evaluate your cybersecurity businesses and help you with competitive landscape, product positioning, and give you that advice that can actually make the difference between you going to the next stage or not. That's all I had to say. Again, email me if you have any questions. This will be shared only with the people who asked me for it, since we have more than 80 people joining. And also, I would love to take any questions outside of this. The last point I want to make, please don't ask me to connect on LinkedIn with you. I don't want to do that because I have more than 500 people who are security practitioners in my LinkedIn network. And I had bad experience in the past when people connected with my LinkedIn network and then started pitching to the people within my network. Then I hate that part. So I'm not going to accept any LinkedIn invitations from anyone on this webinar for the obvious reasons I just highlighted. I value my relationships and I do what I preach. I believe in long-term relationships, and that's why that's a very serious practice that I take for myself. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. This was a pleasure, and we're going to do another one in the foreseeable future. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you,
Come on,
everybody.
guys, take care.
Happy holidays.
And holidays.
Holidays.
Bye-bye.